So in this video, we're going to talk about Moira Buffini's play Welcome to Thebes, which is quite possibly my absolute favorite play of all time. I love this play. I've reread it a number of times. And actually, pretty much by chance, when this premiered at London's National Theatre in July of 2010, I actually got to see a performance in the initial run. I also have a chapter of my book that's about half about this play. It's about this play and Femi Osafisan's Women of Owu. But this is such a good play. It's a very, very loose Antigone adaptation, set in a contemporary early 20th century post-Civil War Thebes. And according to the description, where is it? Here it is. According to the description, it is a city named Thebes somewhere in the 21st century. So that's actually really interesting because the National Theatre production in 2010 used a West African aesthetic, and indeed Eurydice, who's the president-elect of Thebes in this play, is based on I can't remember her full name. Sirleaf is her last name. I think it's a hyphenated last name. I don't know. I wrote about this several years ago, but in the Second Liberian Civil War, there was a group called the Women for Peace. I don't know. I forget exactly what the group was called. Women's Liberian Peace Movement or something like that. And basically they would go out onto the battlefields and stand between the combatants so that to try and sort of stop the fighting. So Eurydice is based on this character. Or not this character, is based on Sirleaf, who became then the president of Liberia after the Second Civil War. There's nothing, though, in the play itself that inherently requires a West African aesthetic. This could very easily be Bosnia in the 1990s. This could be Mexico City. This could be the projects in New York or Chicago. This could be set in Southeast Asia. This could be set in the Middle East. Anywhere that there's violence and this sort of 21st century, late 20th century style brutal guerrilla warfare. Because that's really one of the key elements of this play. This is a city-state that's been utterly devastated by civil war, by feuding warlords, and by extreme carnage and destruction. And actually, we get a sense of that right from the beginning. This play has a great beginning. We get 3 Theban soldiers who come on stage. Megara, a woman of 20, Miletus, a sergeant of maybe 30, and Junior Lieutenant Scud, a boy of 13. So basically they come on, and in character, they do the silence your cell phones, the play's starting kind of thing. And it's threats. It's, if your phones go off, we will shoot kind of thing. But then Megara gives us an introduction to Theban politics. And this is very graphic and very brutal. But again, it's crucial to remember that this is one of the first things that we experience in this play. So Megara says, "The only politics in Thebes is this," her gun. "This has been the government for years. I don't know how it started, I don't care. Some brother fighting brother for the power. My politics began the day the soldiers came. This is my shit, and if you're scared to hear it, close your eyes. We heard their guns and ran. I could feel bullets whooshing past my face. I saw a man turn around and try to stop one with his hand, because he thought, 'What's this?' As if the bullet was a fly. Whoosh. They trapped us by the river. If I could describe how it felt, the way they held me down and tore, you'd be sick. I know you would. Or scream and we'd be here all day while you had counseling and cried. After 5 or 6 I was unconscious, I suppose. The soldiers must have thought that I was dead, because when I came to I found myself in a pile of bodies. My mother and my sister seethed with ants. This is your introduction to our state, because everybody has a tale like this. I slipped into the river, floated to the fields. Time was not even. It was odd. It bends and it's misshapen in my mind. A day was like a month a year. I don't think I spoke one word. I ate forest nuts and beetles. Poor old me. My monthly bleeding never came again. And then Scud, the child soldier whose job it is to find mines, yells boom and jumps on. His way of trying to find mines is jumping on piles of rubble and yelling boom. And Megara goes on. And then Miletus found me. He's the sergeant there, my brother now. He put this gun into my hand and made me human once again. When we fall upon our enemies, always the men who did that to me. Feelings come on me like I don't know. I'm not scared of anything, no pain about my family, no cares. I'm all-powerful, all fire. I'm revenge. Megara. I'm fury. Whoosh. The Furies have no laws other than their own, which even Zeus himself has to obey. These are my laws now, and this, my life of politics. Peace? Never, not for me. So this is a brutal start to a play. And it goes on, much in that same vein. But this is, again, a very, very loose Antigone adaptation in that the conflict over burying Polynices' body. Polynices was a brutal warlord in the Civil War in this version, which is not necessarily that far off what he is in the Sophocles and Euripides versions, and even the Aeschylus version, which is a little gentler. But the primary focus of this is on why can't I think of her name? Eurydice. Sorry. So the primary focus of this is on Eurydice, the president-elect of Thebes, who's trying to rebuild the state and create peace and stability. And she is engaged with Theseus, the first citizen of Athens, who's also the Theseus of the Hippolyta play from Euripides. Theseus is not entirely concerned with sort of pragmatic elements of rebuilding Thebes. He is much more interested in making nice speeches, and he wants to secure an economic zone for Athens. And so this is actually the key component that I wrote about in my book about this play, is this is how a lot of times global economics under neoliberalism works, is the global north, which in this play is represented by Athens, or Buffini's Britain, my own country, the US. The global north very often exploits the global south, in this case represented by Thebes, but we can also associate it with Liberia, West Africa, former colonized countries, etc., etc. And some of the ways in which that exploitation is carried out is through global finance. So the fact that Theseus comes and says he wants to set up an economic zone where business can flourish, etc., etc., this is very much the neoliberal approach to global politics, focused on finance, and particularly finance that's going to be beneficial to Athenian interests. So this is much of what the conflict is about, is Theseus has the Athenian agenda, which is almost entirely focused on making Thebes a good economic partner for Athens, and Eurydice has the Theban agenda, which is about rebuilding society, providing stability, providing food, shelter, resources for the people of Thebes, etc., etc. This is complicated by Prince Tydeus, who's not actually a prince. That is pointed out to us in the play. Just his name, his first name, his given name is Prince. Tydeus was a warlord during the war, and he's now the opposition leader. Very, very open to the idea of violent rebellion, and he actually he gets his forces together for a violent coup a couple of times. So all of this sort of complicates the attempt that Eurydice is making to rebuild a peaceful, stable Thebes. In the background of this, so whereas in Sophocles' Antigone, the conflict between Antigone and Creon over Polynices' body is central, here it's really in the background, but it is definitely there. Eurydice gives the order that Polynices' body is not to be buried, and Antigone does bury him against her orders, but it's really quite peripheral. But interestingly enough, this conflict does reveal to us some of the difficulties of the peace process. Because Eurydice... So Antigone says, "I'm no different from my brother. I have a violent prehistoric heart. I should be dead with Polynices. Let me be dead." And Eurydice, in a way recognizing her motives for the first time herself, says, "I could have smothered him in flesh-dissolving lime and dumped him in the ground, but what he did to Creon, to Menocaius, my boy, what he did to Thebes, I hated him. I hate him. My heart is violent and it's vengeful too, and I've dressed it up as reparation, shrouded it in reconciliation, saying maybe we will learn from staring at his face, the face of chaos. Maybe we'll choose life and order in society as the alternative is him. But when I stared down at the mottled thing, I felt euphoria of savage hate. It made me glad to see him rot. It's an act of hatred that I've done, a desecration, and I'm guilty, and it is my fault. I caused that child soldier's death." Shortly before this, Junior Lieutenant Scud, there's a whole complex situation, but basically he was shot by Theseus's bodyguards, and Eurydice blames herself. "I caused that child soldier's death and lost the help of Athens. This is the match that lights my own destruction. Not to do what I've exhorted all my countrymen to do, be reconciled. I cannot reconcile. I hate him. Still I hate him. He took my boy and mutilated him. And if I'm full of vicious, unforgiving hate, the moderate and principled new president of Thebes, what future is there for us?" Now, I think that sort of self-recognition is really, really important in terms of distinguishing the Eurydice of Welcome to Thebes from the Creon of Sophocles' Antigone, because it's really only at the moment of destruction, the moment when tragic fate has pushed too far for any sort of recovery, that Creon even starts to recognize that he might be wrong. But here, it's the death of Junior Lieutenant Scud that prompts Eurydice to reassess and to recognize that her taking vengeance on Polynices has not served the state. That she, as much as it may read as weakness to apologize and to acknowledge that she was wrong, this is the ethically right thing to do. And she does it. And in a way, it seems like it saves Thebes. But the other thing here, the other difference from Sophocles' Antigone, is that Antigone also recognizes that she doesn't need to die. I love this advice that Eurydice gives Antigone. You see, the antidote to suffering, the opposite of great heroic destiny, is a quiet, ordinary life. To love. You've done enough for death, Antigone. You can retire from service, I would say. Tiresias, please tell her she is free. And Tiresias says, I only see a suicide, a woman hanging by the neck, her hair like trailing moss. Now that's interesting because we think that that's going to be Antigone, because we know Sophocles. Aha! But we're actually not as clever as we might think, because actually the suicide that Tiresias sees is not of Antigone, but is of Phaedra, whom Theseus has been attempting to call throughout the entire play and unable to get a hold of her. But in terms of Antigone, Haemon has been at least mostly blinded. There was rubble from a destroyed building that he was helping clear, and it had been booby-trapped, and so masonry exploded into his face. So he had actually proposed to Antigone, but he proposed to Ismene thinking that she was Antigone. But toward the end of the play, at the end of Act 4, Haemon and Antigone, this is again shortly after Junior Lieutenant Scud's death, which has profoundly impacted everyone. So Antigone tells Haemon, I want to see what life is like to live. And she does. This is the last we really see of her in the play. So we have a complete break from Sophocles and the fate that Antigone experiences there. And so as brutal and rough and graphically violent as this play is at times, it's also a hopeful play. Eurydice changes her mind. She softens her stance and buries Polynices. Antigone decides to live and to marry Haemon. They plan to go to Athens and have surgery done to repair his eyes, or a transplant of eyes for him. It's a brutal and very, very painful play to read or to watch, but it's a hopeful play. And I love that.